somewhat tenuous relevance of our opening tune we owe to the letter X in Alexander the Great, who, with many other great heroes of antiquity, is compared unfavourably with the British Grenadiers.
Some talk of Alexander,
And some of Hercules,
of Hector and Lysander,
and such great names as these.
but of all the world's great heroes,
There's none that can compare. Pop-a-bum, 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 pop-a-bum.
with the British Grenadiers. This centuries-old tune was first associated with the British Grenadiers as a regimental march in 1706, and the words were published in 1750. It has been enormously popular ever since. Every year we hear it in the annual ceremony Trooping the Colour on the Queen's birthday. It is a magnificent ceremony, but once it was also vital before battle to parade the regimental standard or colour in front of all the troops, so that they would be able to recognise and follow it in the heat of the fighting.
And the march isn't confined to the Grenadier Guards, or to England for that matter. It is also an authorised march of the Royal Gibraltar Regiment and several Canadian regiments, including the Royal Regiment of Canadian Artillery, the Canadian Grenadier Guards, the Royal Regiment of Canada, the Princess Louise Fusiliers, and the 5th Canadian Mounted Rifles. And the opening music was in fact played by one of the great Canadian military bands. And if the connection of this regimental march with our study of the letter X is a little exiguous, it's a great song and has travelled the world with the English and their language.
But now, without further ado, we must examine the not too exacting letter X under the expert guidance of Andy and Lucy, who will be waiting to greet you as soon as you've heard the opening sentence, and the rather less satisfactory rendition of the British Grenadiers to which it refers.
Anxiously exchanging xylophone for saxophone explained Max's exaggerated excitement. The two commonest sounds made by the letter X are those heard in explained and exaggerated, but there is a different sound in anxiously, a Z sound in xylophone, and a few other sounds that are used to try to represent the pronunciation of foreign words.
But let's start with the two most common sounds, which we'll call X1 and X2.
The X1 sound is made up of the hard C or K sound followed by soft S1, as in saxophone. Explained, max and excitement. It is the same sound that we hear in the CKS of socks, and you will remember that it can also be produced by double C, as in accept.
Let's practice making the X1 sound. You start with your mouth slightly open and your tongue resting behind your lower teeth. Then, as you produce a short breath from the back of your throat, you push up the sides and back of your tongue so that the sides of its upper surface press hard against the edges of your upper side teeth, while you use the back of your tongue to squeeze the air against the soft rear of your palate. Watch and listen carefully.
X, x, axe, extra.
X, x, sex, fix, fixture. Now you make the sound and say those words exactly as we did.
And we must practice making this X1 sound when it is followed by TH, as in sixth, as many people struggle with this and make only the hard C sound, as though it were sixth.
Do you remember the joke we enjoyed in our section on the letter T about the precocious, extremely well-developed and rather stupid 16-year-old girl with a lisp who went to the doctor to have her chest examined for bronchitis? When he put his stethoscope to her chest to listen to her lungs and said, "Big breaths," She replied proudly,
"Yeah, and I'm only 16.
Saying sixth is a problem for many people who don't have lisps or other speech difficulties. You must make the X1 sound in full, then immediately push your tongue forward between your teeth to make the soft TH sound. Watch and listen.
6th, 16th, 60th, 66th. Now you say those words. The X2 sound is made up of the hard G sound followed by hard S1 or Z, as in eggs, and in our opening sentence we heard it in exaggerated. Let's make sure we can pronounce it correctly.
You open your mouth slightly. Keep the tip of your tongue pressed down behind your bottom teeth and press the back of your tongue against the roof of your mouth at the back.
The hard G sound is produced by dropping the back of your tongue and releasing a short breath of air, but to follow this with the hard S1 sound, you must immediately raise your lower jaw until your teeth and lips are almost closed, and you will feel the hard S1 sound vibrating against the top of your palate. Watch and listen carefully.
Gz, gz. Exact. Example. Anxiety.
Now you make the X2 sound and say those words.
And now let's practice the two sounds together in a sentence in which the X1 and X2 sounds alternate. Listen and watch carefully as I say it first. Extra examples expand examination exercises exhaustively.
Now you say this sentence, which you may think applicable to this course. Do it first with the help of the marked text, then read it from the following unmarked version. The X1 sound is much more common than X2, but care needs to be taken with the prefix EX, which is where the letter X most often appears. The rule is that the prefix EX has the X2 sound when it is followed by A, as in exact, exalted, or example.
By silent H, as in exhaust or exhort, but not by a sounded H, as in exhume.
By stressed E or I, as in executive, exempt, exert, exist, or exiguous, but not when the prefix itself is the stressed syllable, as in execute or exercise.
By O, as in exotic or exonerate.
Or by U, as in exult. Let's practice words beginning with the prefix EX in the two categories.
As there are fewer, and their rule has been explained, we'll begin with X2 examples, of which the word example is itself an example.
Exact, exaggerate, exalt, examine, example.
Exasperate, exempt, exemption, exert, exhaust.
Exhibit, exhort, exiguous, exist, exorbitant.
Exonerate, exotic, exaltation. Now you say those words, reading them from the unmarked text on the screen.
Now we'll have some words with more common X1 sound. Excavate, exceed, excess, excellent, accept, excerpt.
Exchange, excise, excite, exclaim, exclude, excuse,
excuse, execution, exercise, exhume, exigent,
exit, expanse, expand, expatriate, expatriate,
expect, expedient, expedite, expedition, expense,
experience, expert, expire, explain, explode, exploit,
extend, extent, exterior, extort, extinct, extract, extreme, extricate.
Now you say those words, and we shall help you this time by marking the stressed syllables on the screen.
A few words beginning with EX can also be pronounced correctly with either X1 or X2, as in exacerbate, exanimate, and exile. You have just heard them with X1. Now listen to them with X2.
Exacerbate, exanimate, exile.
However, you can't go wrong if you follow the guideline we've given you.
Note also that the word anxiety has the X2 sound, and you'll remember, I'm sure, the nasal N2 sound we practiced when we studied the letter N.
The X3 sound is found in the combinations XIOUS and XION, and is made up of the hard C sound immediately followed by the soft S2, as in anxious and complexion.
We have already met this sound with the same vowel combinations following it when we studied the letter C and the CTIOUS and CTION endings, as in fractious and fraction. Now let's practice making this X3 sound and compare it with X1.
For X1, remember, you produce a short breath from the back of your throat and squeeze it with the back of your tongue against the back of your soft palate.
For X3, you do the same, but this time you immediately push out your lips in the cartoon kiss, and keeping the back of your tongue against your palate, you use the front of it to make a narrow funnel with the ridge of your palate, its tip being just behind but not touching your top front teeth. And you push the air through this funnel between your tongue and the ridge of your mouth, and so through your lips. Watch and listen carefully as we demonstrate the X1 and X3 sounds in turn.
X, ksh, x, ksh. Complex, complexion.
X, ksh, x, ksh. Complex, complexion.
Now you make the sounds and say those two words.
And we can usefully note here that certain words, like connection and reflection, can be spelt correctly with X rather than CT, but the CT spelling is now generally preferred. Words which must have X include crucifixion and complexion, and it is also preferable inflection and inflection.
Now for another X sound, X4. A few words beginning with X and deriving from the equivalent Greek letter curiously have the hard S1 or Z sound, as in xenophobia, xylophone, and Xerox.
The chemical element xenon,
The substance xylem that carries water up from the roots of plants.
the name of the ancient Greek general and writer Xenophon,
Or the girl's name, Xanthe. Now you say those words from the following list.
The letter X is silent in the plurals of adopted French words whose singular forms end in EAU, as in bureau, though gradually these are becoming anglicised and the sounded English S is replacing it.
The silent French final X is still commonly used in bureau, chateau, portmanteau, trousseau and plateau, though we suspect the reason is that people are afraid of seeming ignorant of the French origins of these words.
Perhaps it's time we adopted the words fully and started using the English S instead.
And of course there are some oddities with the pronunciation of X, as with all the letters in the English alphabet.
Among the foreign sounds represented by X are many from as far apart as China and Malta, but one of the nicest is from Africa.
It is Xhosa, where the XH combination represents the aspirated click made at the back of the throat in the name of this African tribe and its language. Our kudu is smiling at this one.
And now we'll end with a couple of sentences. Listen carefully to this one, an asterisk showing the silent X.
Alex and Xanthi xeroxed extra texts of examples of complex inflections for 16 examination bureau.
These must have been examinations in a highly inflected language in which the word forms change according to their role in a sentence much more than they do in English.
Perhaps it was Latin.
Anyway, you now tell us about these girls' xeroxing of extra texts of complex inflections for 16 examination bureau, and use the following unmarked text right away if you can. And finally, we go back to our opening sentence. Watch and listen carefully as I read it. Anxiously exchanging xylophone for saxophone explained Max's exaggerated excitement.
Now you tell us about Max's extraordinary exchange of instruments, using the marked text first and then the following unmarked version.
I wonder if Max is wise to change from xylophone to saxophone.
That remains to be seen, or rather heard. I can't say I was excessively excited by his rendition of the British Grenadiers on either instrument, if that was a good example of his talent.
Oh, here he is. Hello, Max.
Right then, Max, take it away. Play us out of our study of the letter X.